Welcome to Life by Design, episode 308. Welcome to Life by Design. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Cratio Jug.
Oh. What's up?
Delayed response there, Cratio.
Really?
Did I catch you in a nap?
No, I wish.
Oh,
I wish.
It sounded like you were yawning. You're like, hey.
No, I was stretching.
Oh, okay. I got it.
Maybe that's why.
I got it. Yes, must have been. Well, we are creators of Life by Design with 20 plus. Actually, I don't even know how many now as the group continues to grow. It's been happening recently in the Life by Design with our doctors all around the world. But for now, we'll just stick with 25 plus certified offices around the world. And today we are talking about kind of back again. I was saying in the pre-call, it's almost hard to believe that we're having this podcast again. Every year, this is the time of year, it's in Canada at least, Canadian Mental Health Month. Bell is Telephone Bell Canada. What's it called? Let's Talk, I believe, is the campaign, and really just getting people talking about mental health. Bringing it out from underneath and the blanket and the shadows, and just making it more present so people can be aware that mental health is something not only that's important, but that is, it's a problem for a lot of people, Cratio.
Yeah, it's a growing problem. I think about this every year. It's a growing problem. More and more people are being affected. In the show notes, I believe I quoted some of Health Canada's statistics around mental health. It's staggering.
Mm-hmm.
Like one in five people are going to have a major depressive episode in their life, and again, it's interesting as our culture progresses in certain ways and regresses in certain ways. I'm glad that we're all safe, but now it's more about these chronic things,
right,
that are ruining our life. So I think this is a super important topic for sure.
Well, just to extend even further on your statistics there, suicide also being, one of, if not the leading cause of death from adolescence into middle age for men and women, which is probably shocking to some people, maybe not shocking to others, but it should be shocking.
It's interesting you bring that up, and it should be shocking. Yep. But I look back at all the people that I knew in my lifetime, that I grew up with, that I had a conversation with, that I was there for. It's ridiculous how many of them have taken their own life.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not in my case. I believe we had a kid in high school. It happened when I was in high school, but that was really it. And I didn't really know this person well, but other than that, I mean, knowing people through other people, but not particularly myself.
Wow. Yeah. And, I'm just sorry. I was just doing the math. I think it's like over 15, like around
Oh, wow.
20. Yeah. Oh, it's crazy, man. So sad.
So, what do you say about that? What's the commentary here? I mean, we've talked a lot on Think by Design about the challenges that face people and then have faced people throughout the history of time. Of course, they're different today than they were before. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily harder, but they are unique in their own sense. And, I don't know how much of this is the kind of the coalescence of the state of where we are combined with how people are today, and if that has changed as well. There's probably a lot of factors here.
I actually don't think that human nature has changed all that much. And I mean, it's difficult to comment, right? I mean, I can only express how I felt as an outsider in this. I mean, there's anger, and there's confusion, and then there's, you try to rationalize and view this decision from, um, from your own mind frame, from your own mindset, and it's challenging to empathize, right? Because you just would never have come to the same. I mean, I haven't. I'm still here, and I've never had those thoughts.
Right.
At least not to that degree. But it's tough to empathize with that situation.
Sure.
I think that's the frustrating part about this is, I think people ask themselves, the logical question, well, how can they have done this? And they had all this going for them. And I think that's, really a good place to start this podcast from. It's that it's, there's a certain narrative that each of us has in our own mind,
Right.
and it's that narrative is very important to the decisions and to the what you're going to do with your life and the quality of the decisions that you're going to make.
Yeah, I think, you bring up the point of feeling anger and, how could this person do this? And you probably heard people say, this is so selfish. But at the same time, to, bring empathy to the situation, I can only imagine, and having, my own personal experiences of, you know,
Well, you shared
stress and
last time, right?
anxiety. Yeah. And period of depression. And I can only imagine how dark it must have been for somebody to have to feel like that was their choice, right? To feel like that was the next
Yeah.
logical or illogical step for them, and that not being here was just better to them in that instance than actually feeling what they were feeling.
I think that's really all that can be said about that.
So, when you're advising people, 'cause this comes up in practice, you have people that you've dealt with, clients, coaching clients that have had challenges like this. Uh, what's the direction? What's the advice? What's the support that we can give people who are having these particular challenges?
Well, I think in certain circumstances, the advice is to seek professional help.
Sure.
I can only comment for what I've done and what I've noticed in my life and what's helped me. But I mean, there's lots more people who are professionally equipped to deal with this. So I think it's interesting. Growing up, for me, that was always like something that was never talked about in like Eastern European culture. You never talked about mental health. You weren't
Right.
allowed to show any mental weakness, and God forbid you were one of those weird families where you went to talk to somebody about problems
Right.
that were and I'm glad that that narrative is changing with Eastern European culture, at least the way that I see it. So that's great. So that's step number one. And then step number two, I mean, from our perspective and what I've noticed in my life, because it's the only perspective I can speak from, is taking the steps to ensure that my mental health and my state of mind is at its peak. And I've noticed a big difference, between developing mental health versus the darker end of this, when you're actually dealing with a really negative state.
Right.
It's like health and disease, right? Like there's a
Right.
difference between
Right.
fighting a disease and creating health, and I think both are necessary at certain times.
Yeah, obviously the similarity is obvious. You know, bulletproofing your mind and developing yourself as a conscious thinker and aware thinker, trying to find ways to improve your life. You can do all those in advance and do all those as a protective mechanism. I think you're safeguarding yourself in the future, just like I do by following the other life by design steps in advance of any type of pathology being formed. You're always better off. But if someone comes across, say life by design or other types of information that are helpful at the time when they're in a crisis, whether it be a disease crisis or a mental health crisis, like you said, there's a time and a place for other professional help. There's a time and a place for medication. There's a time and a place for all those things while you are trying to recover. And I think that's an important point that we need to make is, you know, not dying is a really good first step. And if there's certain things that need to happen there that are short-term solutions, I'm all for it. Because you have to get to the place where you're able to actually work on this stuff and get yourself going forward. And I know from personal experience, when you're in the bottom, it's really difficult. There's no momentum. You're stuck. You're not sure what to do or where to turn. Nothing feels like it's going to work. It does. You've heard the words dark and other descriptive terminology, and it's all very true. You just feel like there's nothing and nobody that can help. There's nobody that can understand you. That somehow your situation is so different and worse off than anybody else who's ever come before in the history of time, and there's no convincing you otherwise. So, it is
So
a tough place to be.
So here's a question for you, because you've been there. What
Yeah,
do you what now, this is personally, right? Like forget it,
sure.
forget all the other stuff. What do you think the difference? And I'm obsessed with this question. What do you think the difference is between um, the people who give it another day or give it
Right.
another shot and who call it, like, what's the difference?
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I have to
What
go
do you
back.
think?
Yeah, I'd have to put myself in that situation again and think about what was I thinking at the time.
Right.
When I made the decision to just keep going another day, day by day by day by day. Part of it probably wasn't fully conscious. I think that it's just inherent in my nature to want to keep going, and just part of me, even at the worst of times, still had a general relentless attitude in terms of I want to figure it out. So, maybe
Yeah.
part of it is childhood, part of it is the development of our brain earlier on in life, and setting our value systems and our moral code early. And I feel empathetic to people who maybe didn't have a childhood that was supportive, that allowed them to grow in that way. And I think that
Yeah.
definitely makes it tougher. So if you're starting with a pretty tough deck right off the first deal, I get that that can make things challenging and difficult. So for me, I'm grateful that I didn't. I had, I was safe. I had a safe environment to grow up in. And, when the time came where I had my own challenges, I just always knew I'm like, I'm going to figure it out. Even if I didn't know what to do, I knew that I would figure it out eventually and somehow.
Yeah.
And if I think of probably the best thing for me was just to be busy doing, right? And we've talked about this with business and entrepreneurship, is sometimes it's not about doing the right thing, it's just about doing something and just getting some momentum. Even if it's in a different direction than ideal, it can be better than being stuck.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that feeling of being stuck, I think everyone can relate to that. Everyone's been there at that point in time. You're right.
Mhm.
Feeling stuck, and even if you're moving moving in the wrong direction is still better than not moving at all.
Yeah, and I think that was, what worked for me. I tried to engage myself in exercise. I At that point in my life really started to dig into, I know we're going to talk about different books and such that we've read, but I really did start looking for help that way. Maybe not necessarily, I probably could have went the route of professional help at that time, and I never did. And since that time I've had other counseling, and it's been super helpful. And I would always endorse that. I'm all for coaching. And
Yeah.
I think people seeing just taking care of their mental health as coaching, it's no different, whether it's mental health or physical health or relationships or finance. Just having people who have a different perspective, professionals, success leaves clues, all the things that we say on a regular basis. You don't have to go it alone. In fact, I think it's probably a bad idea to try and go some of this stuff alone. So I dug into that stuff, and kind of went down some paths of different programs. And basically, for me, the light, if there was any, which flipped on, was seeing some things about my life that I'd never really seen before. So getting exposure to just ways that I had been in the past, or experiences in my life that I had not really been super conscious about, just things I never thought about, and
Yeah.
thinking about them for the first time and saying, oh, do I want to be like that? Is that the type of person I see myself as? Would I act differently if I had the choice? And that just sparked a whole rabbit hole of probably 5 or 6 years of personal development, ups and downs. But it also helped shape a lot of, and I know it did for you too, helped shape a lot of Think by Design and a lot of the concepts for Life by Design. And it's obviously it's a central part of my life now.
So it sounds like, if I had to summarize what you just said, it sounds like you gained perspective.
Yeah, perspective is a great way to think about it. Yeah, there was certain things I never thought of, and through
Right.
different people and books and programs, I got some exposure to things that were new to me, and the perspective changed. And then changing my perspective changed my actions, and then that action, fed into feeling a bit better, and then solving more problems and challenges, and finding more and solving those, and just this ongoing process, which I think still continues today, as it does for you and hopefully lots of people, and for our family. Just constantly, I think, I always loved Tony Robbins when he talked about Kanai, constant and never-ending improvement. And he said it for himself. He said his life changed when he heard of the philosophy of Kanai, which was, CANI, constant and never-ending improvement. And that's my philosophy: is I'm constantly and never-endingly trying to improve myself in my life. And that's just something I'll do until the day I die.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you, well, here, what do you do now? Because, like, contrary to what some people might believe, like, I know you have shitty days. And the reason I
Sure.
know you have shitty days is because you're a human, like I'm a human, and I have shitty days, which
Right.
means that you have shitty days, and we all do, right? I think going back to this conversation of like life on social media where everyone thinks that like everyone has it together. We're all humans, right? Like the fact
Right.
that we all experience the same thing. I'm reading a book right now. It's interesting. It's called The Human Laws of Nature by Robert Greene.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, which is awesome. And like the opening chapter really struck a chord with me when he was like, most of you are going to listen to this book and you're going to apply it to every person in your life that you know,
Right.
except yourself. Whereas this is you, right?
Right.
These things where you're so quick to point out, oh, these I'm so smart and all these people are so stupid and
Right.
all these things. He's like, no, no, no. He's like, you're just the same like everybody else,
Right. Right.
right? So my point being is nobody at all times in their life has it together, and
Of
nobody
course.
has all of the aspects in their life together at all
Right.
times. So the question is, what do you do now when you wake up, you have a shitty day, things don't go well, you're like, frig, man, is this ever whatever
Right.
questions you have in your mind? What's your strategy right now?
Yeah, it's a great question because it is true. As much as we strive to improve, we all have bad days
And bad months and bad
and bad
years
months. And
and
yeah, obviously we try and minimize those. And there's so many great days. But what do I do when I have a bad day or a tough day? I think that
yeah,
the to-do stuff we've talked about lots of times. We have strategic planning. I have daily schedules. I have a lot of habits in place. But I think more importantly, and the reason this is really present for me right now is I just left literacy day with a bunch of kids, and I actually was reading to them Six Pillars of Self-Esteem,
right,
and reading to these grade eight Six Pillars of Self-Esteem, and just reading the definition of self-esteem in Nathaniel Brandon's words. Two parts to self-esteem. Number one is um, the confidence that you can survive and thrive in the world, and number two, that you deserve to be happy. And the
right,
experience of those two things together is the development of self-esteem. And for me, that is it. And so I guess the answer, Cratio, is to this point now I've developed such high self-esteem that when things are tough, I already know that I can handle it. When things are tough, I know that I deserve to be happy, and so I will handle it. And things don't affect me in the same way that they did a year or 5 or 10 ago because of the
right.
work that I've done on trying to basically build my self-esteem, and I feel great. I feel very confident that almost anything that comes my way, I'll figure it out, or
Yeah,
I'll get support from somebody who can help me figure it out. And then the second one that I think is important is I believe 1000% that I deserve to be happy. And so
right.
nothing's in my mind, nothing's going to stop me from experiencing that.
Right. As an aside, it's crazy. I was listening to you read that definition, which I've read and thought about, for
Mhm.
many, many hours. And I still get a visceral, happy response when I hear it.
Oh yeah, I read it to the kids today, and I literally read the definition and talked about it for 20 minutes because I think here I am dealing with these 13-year-olds, and there's nothing more important at that age, especially than self-esteem. And I almost cringed. I didn't want to ask them because I didn't want anybody to feel, like they were being centered out. But I was almost afraid to ask how many of you feel like you deserve to be happy, and how many of you feel like you are confident that you can survive and thrive in this world. And I know it's a big issue, and I think at the core of it, a lot of mental health issues are a derivative of a deficiency in self-esteem.
Well, there's
And
also, sorry to interrupt you. Let's be clear for a second. There's also, 5,000 years of a society telling you that the last thing on your mind should be your own happiness.
well, that's right. Yeah, I mean, we've definitely been taught, and it's been demonstrated that putting your happiness to the side is looked at as morally
Good,
acceptable and
right?
morally
Or
good.
forget acceptable, morally good.
Right, exactly. And if you do the other and you put your happiness first, and people see that, you're going to get a lot of people who are going to hate on that because they look at you as somehow arrogant or, somehow holier than thou. When really the only way that your life can be extremely happy and fulfilled is if you put yourself first and make sure that you understand what your core values are and who the most valuable people are to you, and then spend your time and energy caring about them. And really, Dana and I talk about it all the time, and it's probably I should probably just tattoo it on my arm or somewhere that just says "Who cares?" Because I repeat that statement a lot for myself as well. Just who cares? Because I don't. But I'll tell you what, a lot of people look at things I don't care about and they might say, wow, that person's cold or they're rigid. But the flip side of that is there's things I care about, and I care about them so much that I can almost not talk about them without emotionally getting choked up. So instead of caring about everything, I just allocate all my caring to certain things and certain people.
Yeah, well, again, that's just human nature. It's impossible. That's a complete impossibility, to care about everything
But that's what we're taught to
the
do,
same. Of
right?
course, well,
And I think that's where the dissidence comes, and that's where people's anxiety and stress comes from, is somehow to be morally good and looked upon as a good person, you have to care about everybody and everything, and just really get involved in all the different problems that people have. And it's just diluting your energy and attention to the things that are most important. And of course you're never going to fully succeed or fully be happy, because that's just not even humanly possible.
that's what you took the words right out of my mouth, where they're preaching a code, that's impossible to get to, right? Like, hey,
Mm.
I want you to climb to the top of this mountain, and I'm only going to give you a straw, no climbing gear.
Right.
So
I want you to
so go
climb
for it.
every mountain at the same time.
Right. And you're a failure, by the way, if you don't get to the top under
Right.
these conditions.
Exactly. No, I think that, and for those listening, I think, by taking on this approach and this philosophy, a lot of times you are looked upon as, less than, you are going to be looked upon as, somehow cold and rigid. And you just have to get to the point where you're okay with that, because the flip side is you're enjoying your life and yourself and the people you care about and the things you value so much that it doesn't matter. And I'll finish with this and I'll let you chime in. But, I think the big thing for me was getting to the point of recognizing that the not caring about the other things didn't mean that I didn't like the other things, or that I had some kind of anger or animosity or, negativity towards the other things. It's just that I don't care, but not care in terms of negativity, just not care in terms of neutrality. Like, I just don't care. And that was a big thing for me, because I recognize that it's not bad. It's just neutral. And over here is where I'm going to put my energy and attention.
I totally agree. It was more of a going through this for me, because we're talking about,
Hmm.
the idea of selfishness and that I deserve to be happy. It was more of an uncovering versus,
Right.
I always kind of knew it. Growing up, I always really resonated. I always had a strong reaction to people who took on a big challenge and succeeded. There's always something inside of me that was really attracted to those stories, the underdog story
Right.
and stuff like that. And it was nice to experience that, that idea that maybe just what I've been taught my whole life, with the best of intentions, just wasn't necessarily all correct.
Yeah. Yeah. No, these are great podcasts. I love doing these. Hopefully you guys love doing these too. And hopefully this isn't just for Cratio and I, because I think these are super valuable. And if you want to go further down the path, guys, and we can help you, then check out the show notes at lifebydesign.com/podcast. And we'll put the free Think by Design ebook in there as a free download. And also check out the new 30-day challenge. It's a free challenge. You'll see Cratio every day for 30 days, and there's lots of resources and tools. So check that out. And thank you so much for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design.